All right, so this video is going to be about the basics of osmosis and tonicity. What you want to do to start off is see if you can answer these three questions on your scrap paper or your whiteboard. So pause the video and try to answer these three questions. All right, let's go through them. Basically, osmosis, is the movement of water across a membrane. And water is always going to move from where it has a high concentration to where it has a low concentration. The other way to think about this is that water is always going to move towards where there is a lot of stuff dissolved or solute. Now, a solute can be things like salt, or in this case, it's showing it as sugar. So you can see water is actually moving towards where there's more sugar. Okay, it's helping dilute it. All right, we know this is passive, meaning it does not require any energy or ATP. Now, what does tonicity mean? Tonicity is the fluid. It's a description of the fluid or the environment or the solution that's surrounding the cell or cells. Okay, so it's the way that we describe those cells. There's three different ways you can describe that solution that's surrounding the cells. The first one is going to be called isotonic. So if we take a look at our image here, we can see that we have a cell. It's in a solution of water, and in that water, and even in the cell, we have these bluish purple solutes dissolved in it. For this situation class, I'm going to call this salt. We're going to say that the salt is the solute and that salt is dissolved in it. Okay, so if you take a look at the salt and how it's dissolved, you can see that it's pretty even in terms of its spacing outside the cell as inside the cell. So, which means it probably has relatively the same concentration. So isotonic means the same. Iso means the same. So we have the same concentration of salt outside the cell as inside the cell. So if they're the same, we say isotonic. Now you might think, well, water is not going to move. It's the same. Well, that'd be wrong. Water is going to move. It's going to move both into and out of the cell at the same exact rate. And we call that equilibrium. So you want to remember that isotonic and equilibrium are married to each other. Whenever a cell is in an isotonic solution, water will move in equilibrium. Now let's talk about what happens if a cell is in a hypertonic solution. The word hyper means greater. So if we take a look at this, our salt or our solute has a greater concentration outside of the cell than inside of the cell. So our solution is hypertonic. It has a greater concentration of salt or solute. And because of that, water wants to move from inside of the cell to outside of the cell. And when it does that, you can see the cell kind of shrinks, right? It kind of shrinks and gets smaller. When water moves out of the cell and the cell loses water, that's called plasmolysis. The words hypertonic and plasmolysis, they're married to each other. They always go together. Here we can see a cell going through plasmolysis and shrinking. It's in a hypertonic solution, so water wants to leave the cell. It's kind of like if you would take a cell and put it into salt water. All right, our final tonicity environment that we can describe is hypotonic. In a hypotonic solution, you can see that the salt concentration in the solution is less than inside the cell. We have a lot higher concentration in the cell. And what happens is the water, again, wants to move towards where there's more concentration. It wants to try to dilute it. So water is moving into the cell. And take a look, guys. The cell is actually getting larger. It's getting bigger. Okay? When the cell gets larger and bigger, that's called cytolysis. It's a net gain of water. So a couple things to go over here. Hypo means less than. Okay, so look, we have less solute in our solution that's surrounding it. Okay, the way I remember all of these things, if I can remember hypotonic, I can remember the rest. So here's how I do it. Hypo makes a hippo. The cell gets big and large like a hippo because it gains water. Hypotonic solution. Hypo makes a hippo. It goes through cytolysis. Hypocyto. Okay, so here we see it, guys. Hypo makes a hippo. The cell goes through cytolysis. Hypocyto. Hypocyto, the cell goes through cytolysis. Hypo makes a hippo. All right, so this is good for plant cells. They have a cell wall that helps them stand up when they get full of water, okay? And this is bad for animal cells because if they go in a hypotonic solution, they swell and they actually burst, okay? Because they don't have cell walls. All right, so if any of these questions or ideas are confusing to you, you want to make sure you rewatch this video several times. You definitely need to know the difference between isotonic, hypertonic, and hypotonic.